just jumped in, which might not have been the best thing looking back, but hey, it worked out really well. I found that I had allowed myself to believe fears for so long that, oh, I'm never going to do it. Oh, you have to have X, Y, and Z in order before you can take this step, that I just needed to take the leap.
Welcome to the Brands That Book Show, where we help creative businesses build their brands and find more clients. I'm your host, Davey Jones, and today we're chatting with Kat Schmoyer of Dear Sweetheart Events, Creative at Heart Conference, and of course our personal brand, Kat Schmoyer. Today, Kat is sharing with us about how she diversified her offerings so that she could increase her profit.
That's one of my favorite questions that I have here is
great.
about that. So, all right, so let's get started. All right, let's just dive in. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I mean, if you had decided not to, I would have probably just pestered Matt until he got you to come on the show. So I'm glad that you just said yes. But there's a lot to talk about, and I feel like when I was trying to come up with kind of ideas for what this interview would look like, what kind of questions I wanted to ask, there was so much that I could talk about. I could talk about handling criticism, which is something that I feel like you do so well and elegantly, and it's just something that everybody in business has to deal with. I could have talked to you about your most recent brand launch with Kat Schmoyer. Now you're managing at least 3 different brands, so there's plenty to talk about there. But in the last year alone, you've gotten pregnant. Congratulations! Expecting a little boy in May, who's going to be our little boy's best friend.
There you go.
Just so you know, David is a great name. All right. I don't know where
we
that
keep
is
getting pitched all the names.
Okay, yeah. You brought Matt on full time, your husband. How's that been? How's that looked?
It's been really awesome. So if you had asked me 4 years ago if my husband would ever work with the business, like if we would ever work together full time, I would have laughed in your face because we are so different. Our personalities are so different, and he is not he just isn't he's not feminine in any way, shape, or form. And you can see all the pink things. And I'm a wedding planner, and there's just so much girliness about my business, right? Even my brand. And so I would have literally laughed at you. But it's been the best thing for our marriage, honestly. I feel like we have so much more to communicate about because we work together full time. So he's so much more a part of the business and the business decisions that even just our conversations at over dinner and things like that are so much more fun, because we're doing the same things and we really are a team in every aspect of our life, which we never really had before. Really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, one of the things though that I found was a challenge working with Krista is that we did all of a sudden have so much more to communicate about. And it's crazy, I think, how much changes when you go from not seeing each other for an 8-hour period a day to literally seeing each other every day,
all the time.
Yes. So yes. I know that was there was certainly an adjustment period. Maybe something that we're still going through. Since starting to work together.
Absolutely, and I mean the business will quote mine, from the beginning. So then to bring him in, it was kind of interesting to teach him certain things and then be oh no, that's wrong. You can't do it that way. And have to have those conversations with your spouse. Very different. And, just somebody that you've hired on. So definitely learned a lot with conflict management too, I think, through all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond that, you just we got through what round of Creative at Heart back in November? That
was round 7 was our most recent round, and we're getting ready to launch round 8.
Yeah, and that's super exciting. And round 7, I mean, that was probably one of your most successful Creative at Hearts to date, right?
It was. It's hard to pick a favorite because it is, I feel like, picking a favorite dog or a favorite child or something like that. But for so many reasons, I feel like it was successful. I feel like we finally stepped into our own as a conference, as an educational experience for creatives. We were really able to put that brand voice out there and be very strong with what we wanted to bring to the table. And our attendees saw that. Our educators were able to, pour into our attendees. So I'm really excited for 2018.
Yeah, we're really excited too. And that's something that we'll definitely loop back around to towards the end of the interview here. And I feel like we've kind of gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves. I really want to go back and I want to focus on your wedding planning business. And I think that just the things that have gone on for you in the last year have illustrated how much you have going on and how much we could possibly talk about, right?
Right.
But your first business, right, was Dear Sweetheart Events. And can you just tell us, how did that start? How did you decide to get into wedding planning? And then how has it evolved over the course of its existence?
Yeah, so very cliche. I planned my own wedding and thought, hey, I planned my own wedding. I can totally plan other people's weddings. I had always loved like creative space. Like I was one of those like blog stalkers, right? And Instagram was like just becoming a big thing when I launched my business 4 years ago. So I was following a lot of people within the wedding and like creative space and realized that, hey, wedding planning was kind of like my ticket in, for lack of a better way to say that. Like I loved it. I loved planning our wedding. And I thought I could do that for other clients. I could really put myself out there and be able to serve them in that way. My 9-to-5 was incredibly draining. It wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started pushing like so much energy into growing Dear Sweetheart Events as fast as I could so that I could quit my day job.
So how did you even take that first step? So, I mean, you planned your own wedding,
right.
But how did you take that first step to getting your first client? I mean, had you already started doing some of that stuff on the side, even before you really knew you wanted to become your full thing, or did you just jump in?
Yeah, I just jumped in, which might not have been the best thing looking back, but hey, it worked out really well. I found that I had like allowed myself to believe fears for so long that, oh, I'm never going to do it. Oh, you have to have X, Y, and Z in order before you can take this step, that I just needed to take the leap. So I signed up for my LLC on October 1st. I'll never forget sitting in our townhouse at our kitchen table and immediately started reaching out to the wedding vendors that we had booked since our wedding was just a couple months prior. I reached out to all of them, told them about what I was doing, changed my Instagram handle to my business name, and just started putting as much energy and resources as I could. The very first bride I booked was actually a bride who commented on my wedding on Caitlin James's blog and then reached out to me and said, I would like for you to like do this for my wedding. So I booked her through a random blog comment and then just continued to build through social media and styled shoots and things like that. But yeah, I did it a little bit backwards because I was so tired of telling myself no that I just needed to like jump in and put it all out there at once.
How do you even know where to start? Did you have any experience with this kind of stuff in the past before? Like, you knew you needed to start an LLC. You immediately changed your Instagram handle to your business name. Like, how did you get direction from anybody during this time period, or?
Not really. I think because I had immersed myself in the industry already, I'd read a lot of blog posts, right? So I was following a lot of actually like wedding photographers in the industry. And so I knew kind of the general, like I can start here and then DIY it a little bit and figure it out as I go and do a lot of trial and error, like in those early stages. And the thing that was really shocking to me was like when I did reach out to those wedding vendors, like my wedding vendors, and say, hey, I've started my business, everyone was so positive. When I changed that Instagram handle, when I made those very small steps, people were very positive and very encouraging about that. And then you get that encouragement and you want to propel even further forward. You know what I mean? Because you're like, oh, well, people are excited. Like nobody thinks I'm crazy. I just think I'm crazy and I'm just going to keep moving forward and see what happens.
And that's so important too. I think that initial feedback you get from people, and I think that's one of the most terrifying things is to tell people of your idea. So regardless of whether it's wedding planning or whatever business it is that you're starting, going out and saying, "Hey, I'm doing this." All right. I mean, it can be extremely scary, especially because you're not sure how people are going to react. You're not going to, you're not sure if people are going to be like, really, you're doing this. Like, what gives you the right to do this? So it's awesome that you had people in your life that were super enthusiastic and supporting and encouraging of you when you first got started. But so you booked your first client, and did it roll from there, or
yes and no. Yeah, I think that pricing has always been difficult, especially in the beginning stages. You're trying to figure out like, well, what's the numeric value that I'm putting beside my worth? And in the beginning, I tried to be a little bit strategic with that pricing structure, but also, made some trial and error mistakes and look back and say, oh, I should not have allowed her to only pay me that amount of money for that amount of work, things like that. So I think that in terms of the like clients rolling in, I was able to work with like a handful of who I would now consider ideal clients. Like even to this day, if they came to me now 4 years later, I would still book them. Like I'm like, yes, that was perfect. Wedding day, like the aesthetic of the wedding as a designer and a planner, also just the bride's personality, right? Like not a bridezilla, like those kinds of things. But then there was also clients that I was like, you know what? I'm working with them because I need to leave my full-time job, and they're not necessarily ideal for my business, but they're helping build momentum and propel my business forward. So this is like the choice that I'm going to take because I'm in year one.
And I think that's so important too. And I think, we, especially if you're just reading blog posts and a lot of them are talking about the importance of booking your ideal client and the value in saying no. And all of those things are true. But if you don't have any business otherwise, you need to say yes.
Right,
you need to say yes. You need to pay the bills. And I think that sometimes just in taking clients that you don't think will be your ideal clients, you find, oh, actually, I loved working with them. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a reflection process on, okay, well, why did you like working with them? And maybe it expands your idea of who your ideal client is. But how did you find those initial clients? So the first one came from an Instagram post essentially, right? Or a comment on a blog post, you said?
A comment on a blog post, yeah.
Yep. And what about the other ones? Did they see this first wedding, or did you book people? Were you booking people even before this wedding had taken place?
I was booking people before the wedding was taking place. So I received some like vendor referrals, which was awesome, because I had reached out to the vendors that I had worked with. But then I also put together little like introduction packets and sent them out to 30 vendors that I felt like would be ideal for me. So this was a mixture of like wedding photographers, venues in my area, like all sorts of things. And at the time I didn't realize it, but in sending those out, I actually sent them out to vendors all across the state and even out of state, because Krista actually got one. I don't know if she remembers. Krista got one like 4 years ago. And it actually then allowed me to really broaden my reach. So then all of these vendors who are working in all sorts of different like areas of like business and different, types of clientele are, getting my contact information, and then I'm having the ability to potentially work with them too. The other thing that really helped me find and book clients was actually styled shoots. And while it's like an indirect effect, it's not necessarily like I'm not meeting clients at the styled shoot, but when you're new and you have no portfolio, like nothing, like I had my wedding and that was it. I had to get portfolio images. So I did 16 styled shoots in my first year, which is crazy. Life was crazy. But that built momentum because those styled shoots were ideal, right? Like they were what I wanted to create, clients I wanted to book. I'm then able to post like behind the scenes about them on social media, share the professional images from the amazing photographers on my blog, on my website, things like that. And then other brides were like, oh, wow, she's doing this and this and this. They don't know that it's a styled shoot. They don't know if it's a real wedding. So that's then helping build that trust for them to continue to work with me. So I ended up booking 13 brides in my first year. And I think it was incredible because of like doing that and like really building that momentum, because perception really is reality. And when it comes to like the social media world, and I was busy and they were seeing that I was busy, and I wanted them to continue to see that and then want to work with me.
So I have so many questions about the style shoots, but we're going to back up real quick, going back to those packets. So how did you decide? First of all, I think that's a genius idea. I think that even if you're not in your first year of business, that's something that's good to do. Just introduce yourself to new people and make connections, or some variation of that. One, how did you know, like, who did you even start with? Did you, were you just on Google researching like different photographers and other vendors in the area? Did you reach out to a specific kind of vendor? What was in that packet that you sent out?
Yeah, great question. So I used Instagram to like do a little bit of research. For me, 30 was a really good number because I wasn't going to go broke sending out 30 packets, right? You have to think about that. You don't have a lot of money in your first year of business.
That's right.
So like I can send 30.
About how much did each of these packets cost?
I'd have to go back and I can tell you what was in them, and that would probably help. So I bought little craft like paper bags from Amazon, like in bulk. Okay, so that was maybe like $10 for like a big pack of them. My business name is Dear Sweetheart Events, so I sent boxes of sweethearts. Ha ha ha. And then I had little cards made that had my headshot and a little about paragraph, as well as my social media links and my website link. So I stuck those little postcards in each of those with the sweethearts and some handmade confetti in the craft paper bag. So not very expensive, light to mail, right? Can go in an easy mailer. So you have to think through some of those things because, again, you don't have a lot of income coming in those early stages of your business. And then I also included a handwritten note aspect to every single packet, which I think that that's really important. So whenever I talk with, coaching clients or anything about doing this, I think that handwritten appeal makes it even more personal. So each person received a little note, whether it was like, hey, I saw blank's wedding on your blog last week, really loved it, would love to get the chance to work with you at that venue next year. Or, I would love to be able to meet for coffee. I know your favorite is iced chai. That's mine too. Or I don't know, something like that, because hey, there's Instagram. You know a lot of things about a lot of people. You can easily find out. Like, just don't be like too stalkerish, but you can stalk just a little bit to get some, really personal details about them and about their life, and include a short little one-liner when you send out that packet. So I tried to make it really simple, really easy to put together, and pretty cost efficient for being in the first year. And for me, it was branded really well. So definitely make sure it's branded for you and for your business. And then in terms of who those 30 were, I just did some research on Instagram, and some of them were wish lists. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to work with like these photographers. Like these are like dreamies for me. Some were like more practical in terms of venues. Like, well, this is local. This is 10 minutes down the road. I'm sending it to this one, like that sort of thing. And just sort of compiled my list. And then I emailed all of them and said, hi, I'm Kat. You don't know me. I'd love to send you something in the mail. If you're comfortable with it, please send me your mailing address. When they sent me their mailing address, I sent their packet out to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how many? So you sent out about 30. You ended up booking 13 weddings in your first year. Were most of those weddings from, or did they have the vendors, which you sent out these packets to?
Actually, yes. I think 10 of the 13 weddings were with a vendor that I had sent a packet to, which I didn't realize until you asked me that question. So that's really cool to think about.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And think about like just the ROI on that investment there. You probably spent, maybe $50 total on all of these 30 different gifts essentially. And on that you booked, probably 10 weddings. So that's, that's awesome. Now, moving over to the styled shoots. Actually, one more question about that. Did you send to specific kinds of vendors? Like, were they mostly photographers that you sent to, or was it was it florists or venues or?
They were mostly photographers and venues, since for me, I knew that those would be who the bride would potentially book before me, and then they would be sending referrals for a wedding planner or a day of coordinator. I did send to like my wedding florist since I just got married and, I had built a relationship with her, and I didn't send them to any wedding planners, because for me, I was doing this as referral based. And while yes, they could send me referrals, I was really hoping to work with these specific photographers or these specific venues versus going wedding planner to wedding planner for the referral.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as you start planning these styled shoots, all right, and so you did 16 of them, which is incredible. I don't know if I've done 16 styled shoots ever, right? So total over the span of the last 7 years. So you did 16 of them. So that means you had content to share for years. You could have probably not booked any weddings and still had content to share throughout that first year. How did you reach out to people to set up those styled shoots? Because like you said, one, you're still working during this time, right? Are you still working your 9 to 5?
Yes, I am.
So you're still working your 9 to 5, so you're incredibly busy. And you just got to imagine that, other people out there are busy too. And, were you concerned that people would say no?
Absolutely. And I have pitched styled shoots to some people who said no, and I say no to people now and even did at that point. No is just part of being in business. We have to get used to like hearing that word. For me, I found that as soon as I started broadcasting that I was doing styled shoots and being as open as I was on social media and on my blog about it, vendors were actually coming to me. So I did quite a few where photographers would reach out and say, hey, I've been looking for a planner. I'm not the planner. Here's my vision. Can you bring it to life. So all those 16 were not ones that I was like just crafting on Pinterest and then I'm putting together from square one. Like some of those, probably about half of them, I'm being reached out to and like pulled into the experience. And then that started me then doing shoots for photographers workshops and, you know, kind of moving into a whole different world of styled shoots that I had never even considered when I'd first started.
Did you have, again, did you start with a specific list of photographers that you wanted to reach out to organize these style shoots? And did you work, I know for a couple of them you had to have worked with different people because they had reached out to you, but were most of them with different, you know, vendors?
Yes, they were. I'd have to look back honestly, but I think there might have been one photographer repeat, like in those like 16 in my first year, but they were with, you know, all different vendors. Because I wanted to do that. Now, sometimes like the rental company, like Paisley and Jade's a really popular one in this area, right? Like I work with them a ton, and things like that. They might have repeated, but in terms of like photographer, venue, those would not be like repeat. I want to work with new people and be able to make connections with them at the styled shoot and then be able to have additional like portfolio images.
Yeah, and so in your first year, 16 style shoots plus the 30, you know, welcome packets essentially that you sent out.
Yeah.
You met a ton of people.
Yes.
Would you, you know, looking back on doing all of that, was it worth it?
Yes. I was very busy, and we tend to glorify busy, but I do work well in busy. Like busy is, I am a hustler. Like I get bored pretty easily and I like to just do things. So for me, like again, remember when I started, I was like, I'm tired of waiting. I'm just going to jump in and like just figure it out as I go. So that's exactly how I handled the entire first year of my business was I'm just going to keep going and keep moving because I want to build this momentum for my business. I think it allowed me to launch Creative at Heart so successfully even the first time because I had built so much momentum. I was only 10 months into business when we launched the first Creative at Heart. Like I wasn't an expert by any means, but I was building momentum and making relationships. And then those people were then pushing the ideas that I had forward. And that was so incredible to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much impact, you know, relationships can have. Or building, you know, strategic relationships can have on a business. I'm reading a book now called The Power of the Other. Just started it, but it's all about this stuff. And I feel like, you know, they could probably do a case study of your business and plop that into this book. Like I said, I'm only in its first chapter. But moving on, if there was anything, and I want to get back to pricing because I know you had mentioned kind of in passing there that the first couple people, maybe you did not charge them the appropriate price. Right. And I think pricing is one of those, I mean, you just have to get it right at some point because otherwise you go out of business or you just hate your life. So pricing is one of those things I think that when you figure out, it makes such a huge impact on your business. So when you, looking back, what would you have changed about your pricing structure?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so looking back in terms of my pricing, I think that I would have felt more confident earlier on, which is probably something that a lot of small business owners can say when we look back at our pricing. Even in the beginning when you're not charging quite as much, like I did, the very first wedding I booked was $500, right? Putting that out there, right, for all of y'all to hear.
$100 more than we charged. I think our first wedding
like
was $400.
Right, like not like I wasn't rolling in the dough because of that first bride. But I even with that, like I wish that I'd been more confident and like this is what I'm worth. Because I think that when whether we're charging $500, whether we're charging $5,000, you have to have that confidence when you're speaking with that client and when you're putting yourself out there. And you have to believe that you are worth whatever amount that you're putting beside your business name and you're asking them to swipe that credit card for, or they are definitely not going to believe it. And I think I really struggled with the confidence side of things.
You see, that's so funny that you say that, though, because on so many other levels, it didn't seem like you struggle with the confidence stuff. I mean, sending out those packets to just, 30 different people and then scheduling 16 different style shoots and then starting Creative at Heart, which is, probably, I mean, it's certainly one of my favorite conferences or creative conferences that are out there. And, so it's funny to hear you talk about how you struggled with confidence around pricing. So that first bride, she gets you for $500, which is incredible, right? She should be writing you thank you notes like, hey, I can't believe it. This is amazing. I got Dear Sweetheart events for $500. How did you how did you make the decision? Okay, well, I need to charge more. Like, what was the process going through that? Was there something that did you do the work and then realize, wow, I got to charge more than $500? But even beyond that, like, where did you start with pricing? Like, what are some questions that you even have to think through?
Yeah, it was definitely kind of a mixture of like, oh, this has got to be worth more than $500. Like this is, and she was a great bride. She was very an ideal client kind of bride. But yes, not, doesn't match my time or, the energy that you're putting for $500. So one of the things that was really helpful for me, was trying to look at my market, right, and see, okay, what are other wedding planners charging for a bride that's in whatever budget that you're working with? Like, so am I going for, $20,000 to $30,000 brides? Am I going for $50,000 to $75,000 brides? They're going to charge very different. So I needed to do a little bit of research and figure out, okay, well, what am I trying to talk, like, who am I trying to talk to, and who am I hoping will book me? And then when I started to figure that out, I made myself a tiered system. So in the beginning, I had 3 wedding planning packages, and just for easy math, because guys, math is not my favorite, let's just say like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Okay. Like those are like, day of coordination, partial planning, and full planning. I would book 5 clients within that price range. And then as soon as I booked 5 clients, even if all 5 were at $1,000 and nobody booked 3,000, every single package is getting raised $500. And then I'm at 1,500, 2,500, 3,500, book 5, every single package is getting raised 500. So for me to build my confidence, it helped me build that confidence slowly. So I'm saying, okay, yes, these brides were, priced at this point, but now their friends are coming to me. They can still afford me. I'm not all of a sudden triple my price point and out of my referral range, but I'm charging more. So then over the course of 2 years, I'm getting at a point where I'm like, yes, this is where I feel like incredibly confident with my time and the money actually starting to match.
So basically, every 5 weddings you got, let's say you raise your prices. Mm-hmm. Did you ever get to a point?
Hey friends, we're going to take a quick 60-second break so I can introduce you to one of my favorite companies and the sponsor of this episode, Schmoyer. Schmoyer is a drag and drop website building platform created especially for photographers and creative entrepreneurs. It's used by some of the biggest names in the creative industry, from Amy and Jordan Demos to Caitlin James, and it's what we built our website on too. What's awesome about Schmoyer is that it's both powerful and easy to use. The intuitively designed website builder makes it easy to change colors, fonts, images, and objects. Finally, a website you can update on your own without having to hire a designer for every tiny change. It's Google friendly, and you can design the desktop and mobile versions of your website side by side to ensure your website looks great on any device. And you can even integrate a WordPress blog with your Schmoyer website, making it that much more powerful. And guess what? They have tons of free and premium professionally designed website templates to help you get started. But what makes Schmoyer such a special company is their customer support. They're super responsive and are there to help every step of the way. You can even save 10% on an annual subscription by using the code BTBShow. For more information, check out the show notes. And now back to our episode.
Money actually starting to match.
So basically, every 5 weddings you got, let's say you raise your prices. Mm-hmm. Did you ever get to a point where you raise your prices and then all of a sudden maybe you went a little bit longer than normal without getting a booking?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what did you do in response to that? Because I know that occasionally when we were raising our prices, we had that. We raise our prices, then all of a sudden a month goes by and we haven't booked anything, and then we start to fear that maybe we raised our prices too much. So how did you deal with that?
Well, first you freak out just a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. That's normal. Let's be real. Totally panic. You think your business is going to fail and everything's going under. I try to give myself a 3-month grace period.
I just want to say that's like a normal feeling for me on a daily basis. I feel like maybe the entrepreneur's wave,
There we go.
Everything is sinking. So
yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
I'm sorry, but go ahead.
So I try to give myself a 3-month grace period with that, of knowing depending on how drastic my price range, I'm raising my prices, or if it is putting me into a different tier, into a different market, it's probably going to take about 3 months for that to kind of flush out and me to start to see responses that are positive responses. So I try to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing I realized, actually, this happened to us last year with the business. I'd raised my prices and I raised them a little bit too too high. So I was actually starting to book clients that weren't ideal in terms of just the entire wedding just wasn't what we were going for. So I needed to figure out what's the hang up here. And I realized that it was my pricing. My brand is not a luxury brand. So I'm booking more of like the all-American, and my brides are in kind of a $30,000 to $50,000 typically like budget, which is still wonderful, right? And that's still a lot of money to put into a wedding.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not deemed luxury by our industry. And so I have to be careful with my pricing. And for me, that meant figuring out like, okay, do I want to go luxury? Because if I keep raising my wedding prices, I'm going to go into a totally different market of brides. Or can I play around with my entire business structure, look at revenue streams, look at pricing as a whole, and be able to stay where I want to stay with my wedding planning business?
So if you could go back knowing what you know now, would you jump straight to the prices that you are at today? Like, how valuable do you think it was going through that progression, every 5 weddings, raising your prices?
I think it was very valuable. So while it is very nice to get the income that we get today from wedding planning, I don't think that I would give up the lessons that I learned getting here. There was also I remember sitting in Starbucks after that $500 bride gave me her $250 deposit and calling Matt and crying because I couldn't believe that somebody wrote Catherine Schmoyer $250 on a check for me to, work for her wedding. It just baffled me. So to me, that's a big reminder of where I started. And I want to feel that excitement with every single client, regardless of the dollar sign that's associated with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to what we were saying about your ideal client too. It's well and good, and there's value in learning who your ideal client is. But right. I think it's easy to overlook, okay, well now, if I'm just getting started, I only can take these weddings. I mean, if you're just getting started, really you should to a certain extent take what's coming to you,
Absolutely.
And there's definitely exceptions there. You don't have to say yes to everything, and some you might get, there might be some red flags where you're like, definitely not booking that
right.
one. But for the most part, I think there's value in taking some of those early weddings that maybe you wouldn't have taken otherwise, just in learning who your ideal client is. And then same thing with pricing too, because it's funny too, what we found, and we do something similar where every certain amount of weddings that we've booked, we raise our prices a little bit. But we've also found we've hit certain levels of pricing that are almost like dead zones, so it's and it wasn't lowering our prices that fixed that, it was raising them just a little bit more. And so it's it really is, it's one of those things that's can be super frustrating, but like you said, it takes a little bit. I like how you said it takes about 3 months for you to kind of figure out things. And I think that people need to stick with that problem a little bit more instead of just always default lowering their prices back down to,
right.
Whatever they were.
Right.
Do you still have 3 collections when it comes to prices?
No. So we've actually, I mentioned before, I don't remember if I mentioned this before. I love day of coordination. So my business, we excel at day of execution is what we call it. So for me, I found because my business grew quickly and I launched Creative at Heart and then launched Cat Schmoyer and additional revenue streams, and just there's a lot going on. Full service planning brides are really exhausting for me. Just working with one client for that long is not fun for me. Sure. It's just not. And selfish as it is, it's just not what I want to do. I love logistics. I love day of, and we have a really awesome system in place. So for us, we actually only have 2 packages right now. And because we really want to focus in on the brides that are looking for a great day of team to be there for them.
And you have team members now for Dear Sweetheart events.
Yes, I have a lead planner. Mm-hmm.
And do they take their own weddings?
She does, yeah. So she'll assist me if she doesn't have a wedding that weekend, but then she also takes her own weddings under our company. Okay,
that's awesome. So, what you said about remembering, that $250 deposit, you getting that, it resonates with me as well. I remember when Krista started booking her first weddings. And again, her first one was $400. Fortunately, we didn't have another $400 one. So we had raised our prices since then. But she started booking weddings, and I'm thinking, man, if she only books, I'm doing the math in my head. If she only books, 50 of these, we're gonna be rich, or at least rich in my mind, right? And I feel like it's a what I didn't realize was that 50 weddings in a year, let's say, would burn us out.
Good luck.
You know?
Good luck,
I think
yeah.
our peak was about 40, and after that year, we had decided, hey, we can't do 40
Right.
weddings in a year. We just can't do it. So, what are some ways that you became more profitable in business without raising your prices?
Yeah, I love this question. So it really comes down to adding additional revenue streams to your business. I think that can also help you alleviate some of the stress of, so for instance, right now, if I were to raise my prices today for Dear Sweetheart events, I need, right, that 3-month kind of grace period. Like, how is this going to go? Well, I have other revenue streams that can bring in income during that 3-month period. So I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. So you can take a little bit of a risk in your growing business because you have additional revenue streams. I realized very early on, just a couple months into business, that I knew I wanted to go full time, but kind of did the same thing, like did the math of like, okay, well, if I'm getting $1,000 a wedding, like this is like, I don't like, there's not enough weekends in the year to give me, you know, what we need to sustain our family. And so I realized early on I needed to figure out additional revenue streams. So the very first new one I offered was in-house floral design, because for me, that was a way, same client, same wedding day, 2 services I could offer. And I liked flowers. So it was like kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this one and see what happens. And then that was super successful for our business. We've been very, very grateful to be able to do a lot of in-house floral design for our clients. But then that also just allowed me to see business as a whole differently and think about even other revenue streams I could add outside of just the wedding day.
So for the florals, the florals were for the wedding day.
Correct.
Yep. And you were basically, taking the place of a florist.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so what other ones?
So then after that, that's really what it kind of came down to with Dear Sweetheart events. Then when Create About Heart launched, it became, okay, let's look at education as a whole. What can we do to educate the community, and how can this become a revenue stream for our business? Like, I want to do this. I'm really passionate about community in our industry and about practical education for creative small business owners. But you know, like any small business, we need to make sure that it is profitable for our family to be able to step into this. And then that became online courses and my shop, and just, I mean, those revenue streams can then just continue to build off of one another as you see what your audience is responding to and what they're asking for from you.
So in Dear Sweetheart events, how did you even come up with the in-house floral design idea? If you were giving advice to somebody, so you're working with somebody who is also a service-based business, what advice would you give to them in trying to figure out what are some, different revenue streams that they can build into their business?
Absolutely. Think about pain points that your client has and how you can address those pain points for them. So for me, it came down to, we started offering design services. I started offering design planning for my clients, and flowers play such a key role in the design. And I thought, you know what? I could try, let me just try. So I actually pitched it to a bride that I knew would be super receptive to it. The fact that I had never done it before, didn't have a portfolio. I pitched doing her wedding flowers, and she was like, yes, absolutely. I trust you. Here's the budget, go for it. And found that I really loved it. So then I attended a floral workshop, and I started to do a lot more education on that side of things, so that I'm not just adding something just to add something, right? I have to be an expert. I have to know what I'm doing when I'm pitching this to my clients. And another thing you guys can think about too, and just in terms of what are those pain points they have, like rehearsal dinner planning. We've done that for our clients. So having maybe some a la carte features or some other things that you can do. You've already booked this one client. So think, how can you continue to serve them when you've already booked them? And it's easier to rebook a client than to find a brand new client.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that, especially when you're first, just as you said, doing the math in your head, if you're charging $1,000 a wedding, if you want to make $100,000 a year, you're going to be working a lot of weddings that year.
Right.
But it's a lot easier to sell to an existing customer than it is a new customer. It's cheaper to do so. They've already bought from you. Hopefully you did a good job and they like what they've got, so they consider to buy again. But when you sold them on in-house floral design, did you book them as a client first and then say, hey, this is something else that I can do?
Correct. Yeah. In the beginning, now we have it in our package and pricing guide. They see that in-house floral design is a service that we offer. And we do get requests from clients who are just looking for a florist, but we will not take those weddings. I'm a wedding planner first. Our team is a wedding planning team first. We are a florist second. And there are even certain weddings that, depending on the logistics, right, for other wedding planners listening, like the thought of being the florist and the planner is like, holy moly, I can't do both. And so there's those weddings where I'm referring them to really incredible florists that they can excel at that craft and I can excel at ours. So in the beginning, no, it was like we were pitching it after they'd booked. We weren't putting it out there that we offered it. And then as I got more confident with it and our portfolio began to build, it's on our website and it's listed in our package guide right now.
Yeah, I think on the other end of the spectrum is, like you said, or kind of like you alluded to, you had to draw that hard line, like, hey, we're a wedding planning team first. We're not going to become florists. But so I think on the other end of the spectrum, some people will come up with all these different ideas on how they can diversify their revenue stream, but then get away from kind of what their niche is, what they're really good at, who they are. How did you decide, like, hey, we're not doing floral design as a standalone service for people? Was it just not profitable, or just explain your thought process behind that?
Yeah, for me, it came down to like the two P's. It came down to like passion and profitability. So which one am I the most passionate about and which one is the most profitable for the business? At the time when I was working a full-time job, it wasn't profitable to take on every floral wedding or every floral, like if I need this for a baby shower, this for a rehearsal dinner, like it wasn't profitable because I was working a full-time job. I also am more passionate about wedding planning. Wedding planning is my first love. It's the very first thing that allowed me to enter into this crazy small business world. And that's what I wanted our company to excel at, and floral to be a great second best, but not the very first thing that we offer.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have a strong, core offering. And then after that, you can build in other offerings. But without that strong core offering, I think people get overwhelmed by choices, and decisions.
Absolutely.
It's why we don't have, 10 collections. You should limit it to, 2, 3, 5 tops, just so people can wrap their mind around it. They don't have decision overwhelm things. I think that we think intuitively, people want to choose what they want, but they really don't, right? They want to be told, hey, this is what most people need. And this, I offer it as a package. It's super easy to consume, super easy for you to wrap your mind around. But I love what you said about going through and figuring out how you can diversify your offerings, because I think one thing that small businesses struggle with in particular is, optimizing customer value. Saying, okay, this customer has already bought X from me. All right, they already love working with us. We've already added value for them. How can we increase their customer value?
Right.
And so you did that by doing floral design. So hopefully everybody out there listening is starting to think, how can they optimize customer value? And that's something that we're going to be talking about on this podcast a lot, because I think it's super easy to get burned out. Just saying, okay, well, I mean, really, there's a couple ways to become more profitable, but I mean, at least two of them are raising your prices, booking more of whatever that is. And I think when booking more can, especially for a service-based business, because there's limited, manpower in many ways, can lead to burnout. But I think one of the most effective ways to become more profitable is, like you've done, just increasing, or optimizing customer value through diversifying your offerings. So since then, you've launched 1,000 businesses.
Not quite.
But you have Dear Sweetheart events, and you have a website for that, and you have Schmoyer, and you have a website for that, and then you have Creative at Heart, and you have a website for that. And I think it's easy, especially when you're starting a new business, to forget how much work is required to start it, because you're sitting in your started business, your developed business, thinking, oh, well, look at this, I've developed it, right? And and you forget, the 16 style shoots that you did your first year. So how do you manage all of those different brands in a coherent way? not so as to not send a mixed signal to a bride who wants to book you as a wedding planner, and they see this Kat Schmoyer thing and this creative heart thing, and
Yeah, so Schmoyer was actually born because of that, because I felt like I was starting to send a lot of mixed messages. The Schmoyer brand's been around for about a year now, or a little over a year now. And before I had Creative at Heart Conference, right? Very clearly what that is, right? The conference for creative small business owners. And then I had Dear Sweetheart Events, very clear what that is, wedding planning for brides. But I'd started offering education. I was starting to get requests for coaching, and I loved, to be able to sit down with other wedding planners and creatives one-on-one. I was starting to think about courses and, products and things that I could create. And I felt like I didn't have a clear space to talk about that because it could get muddled, right? I'm putting that under DSE, but then my brides are like, wait, so what does she do? Is she a planner? But then she does this. But then I felt like under Creative at Heart isn't about me. We really want to propel our educators. We really want to work with our attendees. So I didn't feel comfortable just talking about the things that I was doing on that specific platform. So it actually was because of a really harsh but great conversation with my friend Megan Martin. And she was like, Kat, you just need to do this. You just need to start this, create a new Instagram, create a new website, new newsletter, just start everything. And I was like, holy moly. And we did it. And it's honestly one of the best things I think that we could have done for the business because we set 3 separate audiences. So now I very clearly know when I'm on the DSE platform, I am speaking to brides. I'm talking about weddings. I'm talking about flowers. When I'm speaking with a Kat Schmoyer, I'm speaking to women who are just like me. It's business to business, right? I know exactly who my audience is, and then I know exactly what Creative at Heart is. So while it seems very complicated, it actually has been really helpful for me to have all 3. Not every business needs that. I think if I didn't have Creative at Heart, I probably could have looped education under my wedding, so that I know that a lot of small business owners in the wedding industry do that with their business, and it works really well. But for me, I needed to have the 3 separate spaces.
So, and I think it's just as important, right, during, when you're offering different things, so, whether it be floral design or however you diversified your offerings within a single business, to make sure that people understand what your core offer is and what you do. And you do all of those things so well. And it must be, that hard work and fairy dust. And
Yes.
really, I want to ask you about that. It's a great tagline. But this is really the question that I think people want answered is, what is fairy dust? Is it a euphemism?
Right,
Can you take fairy dust while you're pregnant?
Oh my goodness. If I actually had the legit fairy dust, I would probably be like a billionaire at this point. So hard work and fairy dust actually came from the first Creative at Heart conference, believe it or not. The very first time I spoke at the conference, that tagline was kind of born out of talking about that's what it takes to run a small business, right? It takes a lot of hard work. And every now and then you need that little extra dose of fairy dust. But for the most part, it's just real talk, business is hard. And we all know that, but we love it and we're addicted to it for some strange reason. That's why we're entrepreneurs. And it takes that hard work and fairy dust to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. And, one last question, and because I think I would regret it if I didn't ask you this. You've definitely gone through some hard times as an entrepreneur. And so, and I got to imagine that there's people out there listening that are also going through, hard times in business themselves. What piece of advice, and we could, this could be a whole separate podcast with you in kind of overcoming criticism and working through challenges and stuff like that. But just, quickly, what piece of advice would you give those people who are just they're just challenged right now? Maybe they just they're coming off an awful experience with a client, or they're coming off of criticism. What would you say to them?
Obviously the very cliche thing is don't give up, right? I think it just really boils down to remembering why you started in the first place. I've definitely had my fair share of challenges within the last 4 years. Some of them have been very, very public challenges. Some have been really private. And then I've chosen to share, snippets about that publicly with my audience. I like to keep it real on Instagram. I like to talk about the good and the bad, the hard stuff of being an entrepreneur. And I think that what really can keep you going as a small business owner is remembering the why and remembering, okay, going back to that story of like, I remember the Starbucks in Short Pump of Virginia, getting that $250 check from that client and crying in the car because I was so excited. Like that was part of my why. I was so excited. It didn't matter what that price tag was. I was just so excited that this was the first step towards my dream. So remembering those moments and why you began will really help push you forward when you feel like, okay, the entire world is caving in. I'm doing that entrepreneur like up and down. That's going to happen, right? It's going to happen over things that like are truly terrible. It's going to happen over things that we're being a bit dramatic about, over a wide variety of things. But we have to remember why we even started in the first place.
And I think that's great advice. And I think people are so, I know we are just grateful that you do share what's on your heart and you do share the challenges that you go through, because it's really easy to look at, people who are doing well in business, such as yourself, and say, oh man, things are going so well for them. They probably never had an unhappy client, or they probably
right.
never had anybody say something that they, that rubbed them the wrong way, or whatever it might be. So I know that people out there are super grateful for that. I know that we're grateful for that. And so thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been so much fun.
And if people want to learn more about you, your million brands, what's the most efficient way for somebody to come and find you?
Yeah, so probably the Schmoyer brand. Just go over to Schmoyer on Instagram, schmoyer.com. It'll take you to the other websites if you want to go all around. But that's probably going to be the best way to find me.
Okay, awesome. And
thanks for tuning into the Brands That Book Show. To stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure you hit the subscribe button.